The great chamber fell silent as Director Elena Vasquez walked toward the center platform. She was alone. No guards, no assistants, no friends. The representatives of 42 alien species watched her from their elevated seats, their many eyes following her every step. Elena was 60 years old. Her hair was gray, and her face was lined with age, but her back was straight, and her eyes were sharp. She had spent 30 years speaking for humanity among the stars. She had fought for every treaty, every trade deal, every small victory. Now she stood before the Galactic Council for the last time. High Arbiter, Kethvorin of the Velthari Dominion, rose from his throne. He was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin and 4 arms that moved like snakes when he spoke. The Velthari had ruled the Council for 3,000 years. They controlled the transit gates that connected all civilized space. Without their gates, travel between stars took decades instead of hours. The Council has reached its decision, Kethvorin announced. His voice filled the chamber through hidden speakers. Humanity has been found guilty of aggressive expansion, cultural contamination, and destabilizing influence upon protected species. Elena said nothing. She had known this moment was coming for months. The real charges were never spoken aloud. Humanity had refused to hand over their shipyard technology. They had refused to limit how many children they could have. They had refused to become a protectorate of the Velthari, ruled by alien laws and alien masters. Humanity had refused to kneel. That was their true crime. The sentence is exile, Kethvorin continued. Earth and its 12 colony worlds are hereby stripped of Council membership. All trade agreements are void. All transit gate access is revoked. Human vessels are forbidden from entering Council space. Any human ship found beyond the quarantine boundary will be destroyed without warning. A murmur passed through the chamber. Some species looked pleased. The Velthari had always feared humanity's rapid growth. The Thesari, a merchant species with skin like liquid silver, seemed uncomfortable. They had made good profits trading with humans. The Myconids, a hive mind species that looked like walking mushrooms, showed no reaction at all. Elena waited until the chamber was quiet again. Then she spoke, her voice calm and clear. May I respond to the Council's decision? Kethvorin waved one of his 4 hands in a gesture of permission. He was already certain of his victory. What could one human woman say that would change anything? I want to thank the Council, Elena said. This was not what anyone expected. Several representatives leaned forward in their seats. For 300 years, humanity has tried to be good members of this community, Elena continued. We followed your rules. We paid your fees. We waited patiently for opportunities that never came. We watched younger species receive help and technology while we were told to wait our turn. She paused and looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species after species. We thought we needed you. We thought the transit gates were the only way to travel between stars. We thought your approval was necessary for our survival. You have shown us that we were wrong. Kethvorin's eyes narrowed. You should be careful, Director. Your species is in no position to make threats. Elena smiled. It was not a friendly smile. I am not making threats, High Arbiter. I am making a promise. You have taken everything from us. Our trade routes, our alliances, our place in the galactic community. You have left us with nothing but our 12 worlds and our own determination. She stepped closer to Kethvorin's throne, ignoring the guards who moved to stop her. You think you have caged us. You think that without your gates, we will wither and die. You think that in 100 years, humanity will come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. Elena shook her head slowly. You have just made the worst mistake in galactic history. The chamber erupted in noise. Some species shouted in anger. Others laughed. The Valkyrie guards finally grabbed Elena's arms and began to drag her toward the exit. She did not resist. She had said what she needed to say, as she was pulled through the great doors. Elena activated the communication device hidden in her collar. Her words were transmitted on an open channel, broadcast to every ship and station and planet with a receiver. This is Director Elena Vasquez, speaking for the people of Earth. The Galactic Council has chosen to exile humanity. They believe this will destroy us. They are wrong. Remember this day. Remember what they did to us. And remember that humanity does not forget. The transmission ended. The doors closed behind her. 12 hours later, Elena's transport ship passed through the last transit gate humanity would ever be allowed to use. On the other side was Earth's sun, small and yellow. Surrounded by the 12 colony worlds that were now humanity's entire universe, Elena stood at the observation window and watched the gate close behind her. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of what had happened. 300 years of work, gone. Every relationship, every treaty, every connection to the wider galaxy. Severe. Then she straightened her shoulders and walked to the communication center. Get me a direct line to Geneva, she told the ship's captain. The General Assembly needs to be in emergency session within 6 hours. The captain, a young woman named Sarah, looked at her with worried eyes. Director, what are we going to do? We're completely cut off. The council has us trapped. Elena looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the quarantine boundary, the council species were celebrating their victory. They thought the threat of humanity was over. They had no idea what they had done. Trapped? Elena said quietly. No, Captain. They haven't trapped us. They freed us. She turned away from the window. For 300 years, we played by their rules. We limited ourselves to fit their expectations. We held back our growth, our technology, our ambitions, all because we wanted to be accepted. Elena's voice grew hard. That is over now. They don't want us in their community? Fine. We will build our own. Sarah stared at her. Build our own what? Elena smiled, and this time there was fire in her eyes. Everything. When she arrived on Earth, the General Assembly was already waiting. Representatives from all 12 colony worlds were present, either in person or through holographic projection. The mood was dark. Many people were afraid. Some were angry. A few were already talking about surrender, about begging the council for mercy. Elena walked to the central podium and looked out at the assembled leaders of humanity. I know you are afraid, she said. I know this seems like the end, but I am here to tell you that it is not the end. It is the beginning. The council has given us something precious. They have given us a reason to become what we were always meant to be. She raised her hand and pointed toward the ceiling, toward the stars beyond. Out there is a galaxy that fears us. Good, let them fear. Because we are going to give them something real to be afraid of. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday humanity will return to that council chamber. And when we do, we will not be asking for permission. The chamber was silent. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. Others joined. The applause grew until it filled the room like thunder. The exile had begun. But so had something else. Something that would change the galaxy forever. 20 years passed. The galaxy forgot about humanity. The council species went about their business, trading through their transit gates, fighting their small wars, building their empires. Sometimes at parties or in history classes, someone would mention the humans. Whatever happened to them? They would ask, are they still alive out there in their little corner of space? No one bothered to check. The quarantine boundary was watched by automated stations that reported no activity. Human ships never tried to cross. Human signals never reached beyond their 12 worlds. As far as the galaxy knew, humanity was slowly dying in isolation. Just as the Council had planned, they could not have been more wrong. On its moon, deep beneath the gray surface, Dr. Yuki Tanaka stared at her equations for the 100th time. She was 43 years old, and she had spent the last 15 years working on a single problem: how to travel between stars without using the transit gates. The Council species had never solved this problem. They had never needed to. The gates had existed for millions of years, left behind by some ancient civilization that had disappeared long ago. Every spacefaring species simply used the gates because the gates were there. No one questioned them. No one tried to find another way. Humanity had no choice. The gates were closed to them. If they wanted to reach the stars, they had to invent something new. Yuki's team had failed thousands of times. They had built machines that exploded. They had created energy fields that killed everyone nearby. They had spent years chasing theories that led nowhere. But they never stopped trying. And on a cold morning in the year 2359, 12 years after the exile began, Yuki finally found the answer. She called it fold space technology. Instead of traveling through normal space, a ship using fold drive would bend space itself, folding the distance between 2 points until they touched. A journey of 1,000 light years would take only moments. The first test was conducted in secret. A small probe, no bigger than a car, was placed in orbit around the moon. Yuki gave the order to activate the fold drive. The probe disappeared in a flash of blue light. For 3 terrible seconds, everyone thought it had been destroyed. Then the communication system came alive with a signal. The probe was transmitting from a star system 800 light years away. The journey had taken less than 2 seconds. Why, Yuki? I sat down heavily in her chair. Around her, her team was screaming and hugging each other. Someone was crying. Someone else was laughing so hard they could not breathe. Humanity had just broken the chains the Council had put on them. The transit gates no longer mattered. The quarantine was meaningless. They could go anywhere, but Yuki knew this was only the beginning. Having the technology was not enough. They needed ships. They needed crews. They needed an entire fleet capable of projecting humanity's power across the galaxy. On Titan, the largest moon of Saturn, that fleet was already being built. Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the observation deck of Shipyard 7 and watched the skeleton of a warship take shape. He was 60 years old, a veteran of humanity's last war against pirates in the asteroid belt. When the exile came, he had been ready to retire. Instead, he'd been given the most important job in human history. How many now? He asked his aide, a young officer named David. 47 completed, sir. Another 60 under construction. We should reach 200 by 2367. Marcus nodded slowly. 200 ships. It sounded like a lot, but he knew it was nothing compared to the fleets the Council could build. The Valkyrie alone had thousands of warships, but the Council's ships were designed for a different kind of war. They were fast and elegant, built to move quickly through the transit gates and strike at known locations. They depended on the gate network for supplies, for communication, for everything. Human ships were different. Marcus had designed them himself. They were ugly and heavy, packed with armor and weapons and supplies. Each one carried manufacturing equipment that could build replacement parts from raw materials. Each one could operate for years without returning to base. They don't need gates, Marcus said quietly. They don't need supply lines. They are self-contained weapons of conquest. When we finally move, the Council won't know what hit them. David looked at his commander with something like awe. Do you really think we can win, sir? Against the entire galaxy? Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled, a hard and dangerous smile. Win? We're not trying to win, son. We're trying to survive. And if that means we have to burn the galaxy down around us, then that's exactly what we'll do. Back on Earth, the changes were even more dramatic. Governor Amara Okonkwo of the new Kinshasa colony had become the leader of a social revolution. When the exile began, humanity had been divided. Different nations competed for resources. Different cultures argued about priorities. Different political groups fought for control. Amara changed that. She understood that humanity could not afford division. They were surrounded by enemies. Every resource, every person, every idea had to be focused on a single goal: survival. Under her leadership, the 12 colony worlds reorganized themselves. A new government was created, one that united all of humanity under a single banner. Resources were shared equally. Education was standardized. Every child grew up learning the same history, the same science, the same bitter truth. The galaxy had tried to destroy them, and humanity would never forget. Young men and women were trained for military service from the age of 16. Scientists were recruited from every corner of human space and given unlimited funding. Engineers worked around the clock to build the fleet. Farmers developed new crops that could grow in any environment. Doctors created medicines that could keep soldiers fighting even when badly wounded. A generation grew up knowing nothing but the exile. They had never met an alien. They had never seen a transit gate. They had never known a time when humanity was not alone. To them, the Council was not a distant government. It was the enemy, the creature that had tried to kill them, the monster in the dark, and they were ready to fight. In the year 2367, exactly 20 years after the exile began, Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Prometheus. Around him, 200 warships waited in formation. Each one was crewed by men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The full drives were ready. The weapons were armed. The supplies were loaded. Everything humanity had built, every sacrifice they had made, every dream they had dreamed, was contained in this fleet. Marcus opened a communication channel to all ships. "This is Admiral Webb. For 20 years, we have prepared. For 20 years, we have waited. For 20 years, we have remembered what the Council did to us." He paused and looked out at the stars. "Today, that waiting ends. We will not return to Council space. We will not seek revenge. Not yet. Instead, we will go where no Council ship has ever gone. We will find the species they abandoned. We will build alliances with the races they rejected. We will create something new." He took a deep breath. "When we finally return to face the Council, we will not be alone. We will bring with us an empire, a family of species united by a common cause. And we will show the galaxy what happens when you try to destroy humanity." Marcus gave the order. 200 full drives activated at once. In a flash of blue light, the first fleet disappeared from human space. The quiet years were over. The real work was about to begin. The outer reaches were dark and empty. No transit gates connected these distant stars. No Council ships had ever explored them. The great civilizations of the galaxy considered this region worthless, filled with nothing but dead rocks and primitive species not worth the effort of contact. Humanity saw something different. They saw opportunity. Captain Zar Chun stood on the bridge of her scout ship, the Silent Wind, and studied the planet below. It was a cold world, covered in ice and snow, orbiting a dim red star. According to Council records, this world was classified as uninhabited. The Council records were wrong. "I'm detecting energy signatures," her sensor officer reported. Cities, thousands of them, hidden beneath the ice. Zara nodded slowly. This was the 7th species they had found that the Council had missed or ignored. 7 civilizations, living in silence, forgotten by the galaxy. Open a communication channel, she ordered. Standard greeting. Let them know we come in peace. It took 3 days for the first response. The beings who lived on this world called themselves the Kordeshi. They were small creatures, about half the height of a human, with 6 legs and bodies covered in white fur. Their eyes were large and black, adapted for the darkness beneath the ice. 500 years ago, the Kordeshi had sent a request to the Council for membership. They had been denied. The reason given was that their religion was incompatible with galactic civilization. The Council demanded that they abandon their beliefs and accept the standard ethical framework used by all Council species. The Kordeshi refused. They were told to stay on their frozen world and be forgotten. When Zara met with their leaders, she did not ask them to change their religion. She did not demand they follow human customs or laws. Instead, she asked a simple question. What do you need? The Kordeshi needed many things. They needed better heating technology for their cities. They needed medical supplies to fight a disease that had been killing their children. They needed hope that they were not alone in the universe. Humanity gave them everything they asked for. In return, the Kordeshi offered something precious: their knowledge of engineering. Beneath the ice, they had developed manufacturing techniques that were far beyond anything humans had created. They could build machines with perfect precision, down to the level of individual atoms. This became the pattern for human expansion into the outer reaches. They did not conquer. They did not demand submission. They found species that the Council had rejected, ignored, or abandoned, and they offered partnership. They shared full drive technology freely. They built trade networks that connected worlds that had never known each other existed. They created something that had never existed before in the galaxy, a community based on mutual respect instead of domination. Captain Zara Chen led the first contact missions for 15 years. She met the Thesori, a species of brilliant mathematicians who lived on a world of eternal storms. The Council had rejected them because their mathematics was based on concepts that Council scientists could not understand. Humanity welcomed them and learned from them. She met the Vorn, a warrior species who had been conquered by the Velthari 3,000 years ago and forced to serve as soldiers in their armies. A small group had escaped and fled to the outer reaches. They had been hiding ever since, convinced that any contact with outsiders would lead to their destruction. Humanity offered them weapons, ships, and the chance to stand free. She met the Singers, a species that communicated through music and had no concept of written language. The Council had dismissed them as too primitive for membership. Humanity listened to their songs and discovered that they contained scientific knowledge that took human researchers years to decode. By the year 2380, 33 years after the exile began, humanity had made contact with over 40 species. Some were advanced civilizations that had been rejected by the Council. Others were young species just beginning to explore their home systems. All of them shared one thing. They had been told they were not good enough for the galaxy. Humanity told them different. Humanity told them they were welcome. The Terran Compact was born. It was not an empire in the traditional sense. There was no emperor. There was no central government telling species what to do. Instead, there was a council of equals, where every species had a voice. Decisions were made together. Resources were shared. Knowledge was exchanged freely. The capital of the Compact was a massive space station called New Dawn. It orbited a gas giant in a system that no Council map had ever recorded. The station was 30 kilometers across, large enough to hold millions of beings from dozens of species. Humans walked beside Kordeshi engineers. Vorn warriors trained with human soldiers. Singers performed in concert halls alongside human musicians. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, now in her 80s, visited New Dawn in the year 2385. She had to use a wheelchair. and her hands shook when she spoke, but her mind was still sharp. She spent 3 days touring the station, meeting the species that humanity had gathered. On her last night, she stood at an observation window and looked out at the stars. Zara Chun, now an admiral herself, stood beside her. "We did it," Elena said quietly. "We actually did it." Zara nodded. "The compact now has a larger population than the 3 biggest council species combined. Our fleet numbers over 1,000 ships. Our technology is equal to theirs in most areas and superior in many." Elena was silent for a long moment. "I never thought I would see this day. When they exiled us, I was so angry. I wanted revenge. I wanted to hurt them the way they hurt us." She turned to face Zara. "But this is better. This is so much better than revenge. We didn't just survive. We built something beautiful. Something the Council could never imagine." Back in Council space, the first rumors were beginning to spread. Traders in the frontier zones whispered about human ships appearing from nowhere, without using any transit gate. Rejected species suddenly had access to technology that should not exist. A merchant captain claimed to have seen a Vorn warship, something that should have been impossible since the Vorn were supposed to be extinct. The Velthari intelligence service began investigating. Their spies searched for answers. Their ships probed the edges of known space, but they found nothing. The outer reaches were too vast, too empty, too far from any transit gate for easy exploration. High Arbiter Kethvarn received the reports and dismissed them as fantasy. Humanity was trapped in their little corner of space, slowly dying. That was the only possibility. Any other explanation was unthinkable. He was very wrong. In the 40th year of the exile, a Velthari survey ship crossed into unexplored territory. They were mapping new systems, looking for resources that the Council could exploit. They expected to find nothing but empty rocks. Instead, they found a human patrol. The Velthari captain was shocked. His ship was 1,000 light years from the nearest transit gate, in a region no Council vessel had ever visited. And yet there was a human ship, sleek and powerful, waiting for them as if they had known they were coming. "Attention, Velthari vessel," a human voice said over the communication system. "You have entered Terran Compact territory. Please state your intentions." The Velthari captain stared at his view screen. Behind the human ship, he could see more vessels. Dozens of them, and not just human designs. He recognized Kordeshi engineering, Vorn weapon systems, technologies from species the Council had forgotten centuries ago. For the first time in his life, he felt afraid. The Shadow Empire had revealed itself, and the galaxy would never be the same. The message spread across the galaxy in hours. Commander Aisha Patel had broadcasted on every frequency, ensuring that every ship and station and planet with a receiver could hear. "We are not in your space. We are in ours. And there is a lot more of us than there used to be." In the Council chamber on Harmonix Prime, chaos erupted. Representatives of 42 species shouted over each other. Some demanded immediate military action. Others called for calm. The Myconids sat in perfect silence, their hive mind calculating possibilities that grew worse with every new report. High Arbiter Kethvarn stood at his throne and tried to restore order. His 4 hands moved in sharp gestures as he called for silence. But the chamber would not listen. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Council faced a genuine threat, and no one knew what to do. How is this possible? The Dazari Trade Minister demanded. Humanity has been in quarantine for 40 years. They have no access to transit gates. They cannot have built a fleet. They cannot have traveled beyond their space. It is impossible. The Velthari intelligence chief stepped forward. His face was gray with shame. He had been responsible for monitoring humanity during the exile. He had assured the Council that the quarantine was working. They developed a new form of faster-than-light travel, he admitted. They call it full space technology. It allows them to travel anywhere without using the gates. The chamber fell silent. Every species understood what this meant. The transit gates were the foundation of galactic civilization. They controlled trade, communication, and military movement. Whoever controlled the gates controlled the galaxy. Humanity did not need the gates anymore. They were free. That is not all, the intelligence chief continued. They have been building alliances in the outer reaches. Species we rejected, species we conquered, species we forgot. They are united under something called the Terran Compact. Our best estimates suggest they control more territory than the Council itself. Cathvorn's hands trembled. 40 years ago, he had sentenced humanity to exile. He had called them a destabilizing influence. He had predicted they would wither and die without Council support. He had been so certain of his victory. Now that certainty turned to ash, the debate lasted for 3 days. The Valkyrie demanded immediate military action. They wanted to send their fleets into the outer reaches and destroy the compact before it grew stronger. The Desari argued for negotiation. Humanity's trade goods were already appearing on the black market, and their economy depended on new sources of rare materials. The smaller species were divided. Some feared humanity and wanted to see them destroyed. Others remembered how the Council had treated them and wondered if the compact might be a better alternative. In the end, the Council voted to send a diplomatic mission. They would offer humanity a chance to rejoin galactic civilization. They would demand that the compact dissolve and that humanity return to their original 12 worlds. In exchange, they would lift the exile and restore limited trading rights. Everyone knew it was not a serious offer. It was an insult designed to fail. The Council needed time to prepare for war, and the diplomatic mission would buy them that time. Ambassador Elena Vasquez received the Council's message at New Dawn Station. She read it carefully, her old hands steady despite her age. Then she laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through her office. She was 87 years old now. Her body was failing, and she knew she did not have much time left. But her mind was still sharp, and she understood exactly what the Council was trying to do. They want to buy time, she said to Admiral Marcus Webb, who stood beside her wheelchair. They think we are fools. Marcus nodded. He was 73, and he had spent the last 40 years building the fleet that would carry humanity back to Council space. Every ship, every weapon, every strategy had been designed with this moment in mind. What do you want to do? He asked. Elena thought for a long moment. She remembered standing in the Council chamber 40 years ago, alone and afraid. She remembered the way Cathvorn had looked at her, as if she were an insect to be crushed. She remembered the long years of exile, the sacrifices her people had made, the allies they had gathered. We will respond, she said finally, but not with the answer they expect. Elena's message to the Council was broadcast across the galaxy, just as Aisha Patel's had been. She wanted everyone to hear. To the Galactic Council, she began. You offered us exile. We accepted. You thought you were punishing us. Instead, you set us free. She paused to gather her strength. Speaking was difficult now, but these words needed to be said. For 40 years, we have built something new. A community of species united by choice, not force. A civilization based on respect, not domination. The Terran Compact does not threaten you. We do not want your territory or your resources. We simply want to exist. Her voice hardened. But we will not dissolve. We will not return to our prison. We will not abandon the allies who stood with us when we had nothing. Your offer is rejected. Elena leaned forward in her wheelchair, her eyes burning with the same fire they had held 40 years ago. Instead, we make a counteroffer. Full recognition of the Terran Compact as an equal power. free passage through transit gates for all compact species, reparations for the 40 years of exile. Accept these terms, and there can be peace. Reject them, and there will be consequences. The Council's response came within hours. The vote was 38-4 against. Only 4 species supported humanity's terms. The rest chose war. When Admiral Webb received the news, he was standing on the bridge of his flagship, the Prometheus. Around him, the officers who had served him for decades waited in silence. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. Marcus closed his eyes. He had hoped it would not come to this. He had hoped the Council would see reason. But he had always known, deep in his heart, that they would not. The Velthari would never accept equality with a species they had tried to destroy. Their pride would not allow it. "Very well," he said quietly. "Begin Operation Homecoming." The orders went out across the compact. 1,000 ships began to move. Human vessels, Kordeshi cruisers, Vorn warships, and dozens of other designs from dozens of other species. The largest fleet ever assembled, united by a common cause, their destination, Council Space. Back on Earth, the population watched the news with a mixture of fear and hope. 40 years ago, their parents and grandparents had been exiled from the galaxy. Now their children were going back, not as refugees, not as beggars, not as a conquered people asking for mercy. They were going back as conquerors. Governor Amara Okonkwo, now 90 years old and confined to her bed, watched the fleet depart on a view screen in her room. Tears ran down her wrinkled face. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Her granddaughter held her hand. "Grandmother, what are you thinking about?" Amara smiled. "I am thinking about all the people who did not live to see this day. All the people who worked and sacrificed and died so that we could have this moment. I hope they know. I hope somehow they can see what we have become." She looked at the view screen, at the lights of 1,000 ships fading into the darkness. "I hope they are proud." In the council chamber, High Arbiter Keth Voran prepared for war. He assembled the largest fleet in Velthari history. He called upon every ally, every client state, every species that owed the Council loyalty. He was certain of victory. The Council had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. No power had ever challenged them and survived. He did not understand what was coming. He could not imagine it. His mind was trapped in the old ways, the old strategies, the old assumptions about how war was fought. He thought humanity would come through the transit gates, where his fleets could meet them in battle. He thought the war would be decided by a few great engagements, where numbers and firepower would determine the outcome. He was wrong about everything. Humanity did not need the gates. They did not need supply lines. They did not need to fight on the Council's terms. They could appear anywhere, at any time, without warning, and they were about to prove it. The war began and ended in 6 hours. High Arbiter Keth Voran had positioned his fleet at the transit gates, waiting for humanity to come to him. He had 3,000 warships, the largest force the Velthari had ever assembled. His admirals assured him that victory was certain. They were still waiting at the gates when 300 compact vessels appeared around Harmonix Prime, the Council's seat of power. The fold drives brought them directly to the heart of enemy territory. Bypassing every defense the Council had prepared. Commander Asha Patel, now 50 years old and in command of the assault fleet, broadcast a message to the station below. "Attention Galactic Council. You are surrounded. Your main fleet is 1,000 light years away, guarding gates we do not need to use. You have 1 hour to surrender. If you refuse, we will destroy this station and everyone on it." For 30 minutes, the Council debated. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to run. The Myconids calculated the odds and found them impossible. The Dazari trade minister pointed out that their entire civilization was held hostage. 1 hour was not enough time to recall the fleet. 1 hour was not enough time for anything. Cathvoran refused to surrender. His pride would not allow it. He ordered the defense fleet to attack Dodd. It was a massacre. The compact ships did not fight like council vessels. When the Velthari targeted them, they simply disappeared, their full drives carrying them away faster than any weapon could track. They reappeared behind the enemy lines and fired. They folded again before counterattacks could reach them. They were everywhere and nowhere, ghosts that could not be caught. The Battle of Harmonix Prime lasted less than an hour. When it was over, the Velthari defense fleet had been destroyed. Not defeated, destroyed. Every ship that refused to surrender was reduced to floating debris. Cathvoran was captured on the bridge of his own command station. He had watched helplessly as his fleet died around him. He had called for reinforcements that could not arrive in time. He had threatened and demanded and screamed at enemies who did not care. In the end, he was dragged before Commander Patel in chains. She looked at him with cold eyes. 40 years ago, you told Director Vasquez that any human vessel found beyond the quarantine boundary would be destroyed without warning. Asisha stepped closer to the fallen High Arbiter. Did you really think we would forget? Cathvoran said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The surrender was broadcast across the galaxy. The Council, the great power that had ruled civilized space for 3,000 years, had been defeated in a single day. Their fleet was scattered. Their leadership was captured. Their authority was gone. But humanity did not do what everyone expected. They did not burn the Council's worlds. They did not enslave their populations. They did not take revenge for 40 years of exile. Instead, they offered something unprecedented. Mercy. Admiral Marcus Webb, speaking from the bridge of the Prometheus, announced the terms. The Galactic Council is dissolved. In its place, we will establish a new galactic assembly where every species has an equal voice. The transit gates will be open to all. Fold technology will be shared freely. There will be no more empires. There will be no more client states. There will be no more rejected species. He paused, his old voice steady and calm. We did not fight this war to conquer. We fought it to be free. And we want everyone in this galaxy to share that freedom. The reactions were mixed. Some species celebrated. The Dazari immediately began planning new trade routes. The smaller species that had lived under Council domination for centuries saw hope for the first time in their history. Even some of the Velthari, tired of endless war and imperial arrogance, welcomed the change. Others were suspicious. The Myconids calculated that humanity could have demanded far more and wondered why they had not. Some species feared that this was just a different kind of trap. A new empire wearing the mask of freedom. Time would prove them wrong. Ambassador Elena Vasquez did not live to see the end of the war. She died 3 days before the Battle of Harmonix Prime, peacefully in her sleep at New Dawn Station. She was 87 years old, but her last message was broadcast at her memorial service, which was attended by representatives of every species in the Compact. I have spent my life fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy, her recorded voice said. When we were exiled, I was filled with hatred. I wanted revenge. I wanted to see the Council burn. The recording paused. But over the years, I learned something. Hatred is a poison. It destroys the one who feels it more than the one it is aimed at. If we had come back seeking only revenge, we would have become exactly what the Council accused us of being. We would have proved them right. Her voice softened. Instead, we chose to be better. We built alliances based on respect. We welcomed those the Council rejected. We created a community where every species has value, where every voice is heard, where every being has the chance to reach their potential. The recording ended with words that would be carved into monuments across the galaxy. This is humanity's gift to the stars. Not conquest, not revenge, but the simple idea that we are all worthy of freedom, that we are all worthy of respect, that we are all, in the end, part of the same family. 10 years passed. The Galactic Assembly met on Harmonix Prime, now renamed Unity Station. Representatives from over 100 species debated and argued and compromised. It was messy and slow and frustrating, but it worked. Decisions were made together. Problems were solved together. A new civilization was being built. One treaty at a time, the old council species adapted. The Velthari lost their empire but gained something unexpected: purpose. Without the burden of ruling the galaxy, they turned their energy to science and art. The Visari became the richest species in the galaxy. Their trade networks spanning both council space and the outer reaches. Even the Myconids, once cold and calculating, began to participate in the new community and humanity. Humanity thrived. Their population grew into the trillions as new worlds were settled. Their technology advanced as they learned from their allies. Their culture spread as other species adopted human music, human art, human ideas. They were no longer outsiders begging for acceptance. They were leaders, teachers, partners. A young Velthari student named Kelthaner visited New Dawn Station on a school trip. His guide was a human woman in her 30s named Yuki Tanaka, the granddaughter of the physicist who had invented fold technology. They walked through the great halls of the station, past monuments to the heroes of the exile, past galleries showing the history of the compact, past parks where children of a dozen species played together. "I have been studying human history," Kelthaner said. "I do not understand something." Yuki smiled. "What do you not understand? When you won the war, you could have destroyed us. You could have taken everything we had. Why did you show mercy?" Yuki was quiet for a long moment. They stopped at an observation window that looked out at the stars. "Do you know why my grandmother invented fold technology?" she asked. Kelthaner shook his head. "Because the council told us we could not travel without their gates. They told us we were trapped. They told us we would die in isolation." Yuki's voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. "We did not invent fold technology because we wanted to conquer the galaxy. We invented it because we wanted to be free." She turned to face the young Velthari. "If we had destroyed you, if we had taken revenge, we would have become what the council feared. We would have become conquerors, tyrants, monsters." She shook her head. "That is not who we are. We survived because we refused to give up. We won because we found allies who believed in us. And we showed mercy because we wanted to prove that power does not have to corrupt. That strength can be used to build instead of destroy." Kelthaner thought about this for a long time. Finally, he spoke again. "My professors say that humanity is the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They say your history is full of war and violence. They say we should be afraid of you." Yuki laughed softly. "They are right. We are dangerous. We have done terrible things to each other and to others. We carry that darkness inside us." She looked back out at the stars. "But we also carry something else: hope, determination, the belief that tomorrow can be better than today. That is what makes us dangerous. Not our weapons or our technology, but our refusal to accept that the universe has to be cruel. Our insistence that we can make it better." She smiled at the young Velthari. "Your ancestors tried to destroy us. They exiled us, cut us off, left us to die. And you know what? We thank them." Kelthaner stared at her in confusion. "You thank us for trying to kill you? If your ancestors had not exiled us, we would never have invented fold technology. We would never have explored the outer reaches. We would never have built the compact. we would still be one small species among dozens, dependent on your gates, begging for scraps of approval. She gestured at the vast station around them, at the ships of 100 species docking and departing, at a civilization born from rejection and forged in exile. Everything we have, everything we are, exists because your ancestors tried to destroy us. So yes, we thank them. Kalthar was silent for a very long time. His mind struggled to understand what he was hearing. Finally, in a small voice, he said, "That is terrifying." Yuki Tanaka, granddaughter of the woman who broke the chains of exile,